Well, we are live. This is episode 1, the first inaugural groundbreaking episode of Heismans and Grammys. Justin Giangrande, I'm Chuck Walton. Welcome. JG, what's up, man?
Is it Heismans or Grammys and Heismans?
Is it Grammys and Heismans?
I don't know. First of all, who even gave us this name of this podcast? Is this Chuck? Did you come up
I
with
thought
it?
Manny came up with it.
Manny's. Let me be clear. I have not won a Heisman. I don't even know if you know what a Grammy is. So.
I don't.
No, but I love it. It's the intersection of sports and entertainment and all things, which is pretty cool. So excited about this. Really fun to have Eddie Murphy as my co-host. I've always dreamed.
Shout out to Uncle E.
I would come to California, live on a couch, and one day I would do a podcast in the middle of the day at 3:30 in the afternoon with Eddie Murphy.
This is the closest you'll get to Eddie these days. Shout out to Eddie, friend of the family. JG, man. We go way back. You're like a brother to me, but a lot of people ask me all the time, like, how did you meet JG? I'm like, I don't even freaking remember really. I just know that he's been incredible from the moment we locked in. You launched this incredible company right behind us, the Network Advisory, TNA. Let's get into the story of you. One, why the name, the Network Advisory?
Look, as it kind of goes into my story, just every business I've ever been in, everything I've ever done, I realized besides the actual service or relationship I was providing is that people also, I felt got a value from my network. I love connecting people. I love, there's nothing makes me happier than putting good people together. And I think properly also setting the room. And so when I was thinking about a company and the things we were going to do when I was going to launch this was, it just felt like the natural name. We're advising people, we're advising brands, we're creating content, and we're all doing it through the lens of connecting them with using the network.
No, I love the name. TNA for sure just sounds cool. Some people think TNA means something else, but
and by the way, we thought long and hard about that. And, initially we're like, nah, no one's gonna ever shorten it to that. It is here we are.
But that's what it is. Most people in the streets when I see them, they're like, I just signed to TNA, and I'm like, then you're signed to me. Did Justin tell you that you're signed to me? But no, let's break down the JG story.
Sure.
First of all, let's take it way back. When did you get your first love for just the sports business? Just were you an athlete growing up? When did you fall in love with sports itself?
Grew up in Middletown, Maryland. Always loved sports. I'd wake up at 6 a.m. for Sports Center, sitting Indian style. I remember in my family's living room, and that was back in the day when you could only watch it when it was on that time, and I'd watch it before school. And always had a passion for sports. Wanted to go to a big football or basketball school. My 5 best friends went to University of Maryland. I was like, y'all are crazy.
You had 5 best friends?
That's a great point. Actually, 3. You all know who you are. Okay. But I decided to go to, I applied to Ohio State, Penn State, Texas, Florida State. And I actually, really deep down, I thought originally I wanted to go to Florida State because I loved Charlie Ward. I thought Charlie Ward was the man. For all of you guys that don't know.
Heisman.
Yeah, all of you guys that don't know, basketball, football player, won the Heisman.
Legend.
And then actually got drafted in the NBA and played 10 years.
The
Knicks. So
point guard.
I went down to University of Florida and Florida State for visits. I fell in love with University of Florida. Kind of right place, right time. I'm lucky because I got on campus in 2022. By 2026, I met Tim Tebow as a freshman.
2016.
Sorry, 2006.
2006. I'm like 2026. I'm like,
no. I met Tim Tebow. He was an incoming freshman. I was president of my fraternity at that time. Candidly, thought I was going to go back to Maryland. My father, my father was in the franchising business for Burger King's. Thought I was going to go back up to Maryland and work with him. Next thing I know, I met Tim. That spring, I created an event planning company, just super entrepreneurial. Saw an opportunity where there's a huge Greek population on campus. 12% of the University of Florida is Greek population. Ended up creating an event planning business. Ended up owning part of a restaurant, a nightclub. Next thing I know, we win basketball national championship that spring. So my dad's like, look.
That was the Corey Brewer, Joakim Noah team, right?
Yep. So then I came back, we went in the fall football. And we won spring basketball. Went 18 months without losing a national championship, and you guys could probably imagine what that's like to go to school during that period. And so,
what was it like? What was the energy around the campus?
Well, it's funny because there was this whole. By the way, some of you guys don't know, but University of Florida academics, I think they're the #1 public academic institution now, and they were pretty damn good then. They were top 50. The president Bernie Manchin at that time was trying to elevate us and. for the first championship, it kind of like held the campus together. But you win football and basketball, and it was all bets off. But I mean, you guys have seen a little bit from that Netflix documentary, but those guys were rock stars. I mean, it was just like you were living for the weekend of sports. Like, you were going to college, you were getting things done, but I think we all recognized we were living in that moment. And
that's incredible.
It was incredible because it also is a college town. It's not University of Miami where you're just in it, if that makes sense. Gainesville is actually a smaller town and built around the college. So just a lot of fun, honestly. There's no question that I wouldn't be sitting in this chair doing what I'm doing. We'll talk about NIL later, but there's no way that I would be doing what I'm doing if I had went to another school. It's provided just a lot of great opportunities. So a lot of fun then. End of an era. Urban's leaving, Tim's leaving. I went with Tim with the Heisman. I decided to move out to California. Options were either go work with my family business again or go out to California. My sister went to school out here at Long Beach State, and I had fell in love with the California lifestyle. And it's a true story. We have a conference call, me, my mom, and my dad, and I'll never forget it. It was a month before I had to make the decision whether I was going to California to just pursue my dreams or going to go up to Maryland and run the Burger Kings. And we have a conference call, and my dad's like, Justin, this is a great opportunity. Take over the family business, blah, blah, blah. You'll have a great life. My mom's on. And so we hang up the phone, and I've just always been a person that just kind of goes for it. And so we hang up the phone, and my mom calls him back and goes, Justin, you've been living a life. There's nothing here for you. You got to go. So I did the stereotypical. I packed up the car, moved across the country, lived on the sister's couch. And
oh, wow.
It was funny because I had some success in college, but the next step was like, everyone, first of all, you never moved to California and you have a dream. You got to start at the bottom. That's just the way it is.
That's period. That is period.
There's no...
From time.
There's no magical, you go here and there's this corporate job.
Yeah.
California, what I respect about Californians and people that move here is like, if you're trying to get into this business, you better be willing to bet on yourself on the come. And if you're not, no offense, you're not going to make it. That's just the fact. So I moved out to California and basically said I was just going to knock on doors and figure out ways to get into the sports entertainment business. And I had an opportunity to get an interview for an internship, a sports agency called Priority Sports. Yeah. And I got it by way of my sister. My sister had a relationship with someone who knew the NBA agent at the time. His name was Aaron Mintz, basketball agent. And they had a small office in Sherman Oaks, and I'll never forget it. It was a guy named Aaron Mintz, who's now the head of CA basketball, Kenny Zuckerman, who ran the football division, and this woman, Lauren Burgell. And so Lauren, I go in for this interview for an internship. First of all, I'm wearing a suit, and they're like, okay, clearly this kid doesn't know. I guess you should wear an interview for a suit, but in California, people looked at me like, this kid's crazy.
Yeah. Sandals.
So I get an interview for the internship. She's like, look, you seem great, but I'm just being honest with you. We've already filled the internship. And so, during this interview, I tell her I went to Florida. Her eyes get a little bigger. I tell her I know Tim Tebow. She's like, I love Tim Tebow. And I'm like, but she's like, sorry, the internship's filled. So I'm bummed. Anyone who's been in this situation in California, sometimes or LA, you feel like your dream's like this close, and then it just wind goes out
in seconds.
So what I was lucky. I had Tim sign a bunch of stuff before I went across the country, and I had this Tim Tebow dope signed helmets, like national championship. And I said, pardon my French, I said, fuck it. So the next day, I came back. I brought the Tim Tebow signed helmet just to thank her. I put it on the desk. She's like, you start tomorrow,
Oh,
and
wait, really?
Yeah. And so I interned there for a couple months. I helped them sign Chandler Parsons, the basketball player, and then 2010, if anyone remembers this is when LeBron and Johnny Manziel were splitting off their marketing from their agent. I just felt like marketing and branding was where all these athletes and celebrities were going. And so, always being one to kind of bet on myself, I left that agency. Anyone knows how hard it is to get into the sports agency world. Man. That was, they again thought I was crazy. But I built a company and left and started a company called Inclusive, and felt like, everything that we see now, modern athlete brand building, celebrities, was going to be the play. We had a creative agency attached, and I'll tell a funny story. We ended up working with an NBA player, pretty high profile at the time. We built his website, and in that contract, I put this thing called digital marketing rights. And I remember his agent at the time thought it was crazy because it basically meant that, like, if I could find a brand that would pay for online content, right, that we could make money. And I remember his agent be like, I didn't even know I made the mark. I said 30%. Like, I have no idea what this were. So he's like, you know what? You're crazy. No one's going to ever pay you for content online. sure enough,
What year was this?
This was like 2010, like
So this is early on.
early on. No Twitter.
2010
no
is like what Facebook was popping.
Facebook was popping.
MySpace was dying, but still around, I think.
That's right. But no one was. The idea of endorsement deals were still, you go a place, you do a signing, you're on a billboard, very Cuba Gooding Jr. on a camel type vibes,
Yeah.
So I left and started the network, started Inclusive, and we started by doing athletes branding, and then worked our way up to signing them to do their endorsement deals. And by 2016, at the end of 2015, we had 30 NFL and NBA players. We had 3 first-round NFL picks in 2015. Had the highest paid NBA player, Mike Conley Jr. in 2016,
Yep.
and then I got introduced to Gary and AJ Vaynerchuk, and got connected to them, by a guy named Larry Benet. Basically said, "Do you know about Gary Vee?" I said, "I don't." He said, "He's trying to start a sports agency, and you'd be potentially a really good fit." And so I got connected on email with AJ and Gary, and it was interesting. I liked, that they really didn't necessarily need to do this. Candidly, they had already made a decent amount of money investing in Uber and Venmo, and they had a huge media agency. But I love that they were just excited about helping athletes, and so I decided to partner with them. I rolled Inclusive into that business. My job was to be the partner EVP on the West Coast, kind of help them be the bridge to the entertainment industry. And something that meant a lot to me, in the sports agency world and just the sports marketing world, this kind of said a lot to me about who they are, and I still hold them in high regards to this day. Most times people will be so worried about what clients you could bring over, right? And I remember thinking like, man, I don't know if I make the jump, who's coming with me?
Right.
They said to me, Justin, we don't want any of your clients. Like, if they come with you after, well, like, we're in on you. So you can, like, rescind all your rights. So I did. I rescinded all my marketing rights to the clients. People thought it was crazy, like the athletes. And, a couple months later, a couple came over, but they were like, look, we want to build with you. It's about your skill set. And, so I did that for 3 years.
Is that the moment you knew you were different from your contemporaries? Because people don't usually do that in this space,
Yeah,
right?
I mean,
like,
that was...
and especially, it's the Hollywood thing. It's like, oh, we like you, but we like you because Brad Pitt or
Yeah.
whoever,
I mean, that kind of shows who they were as people. It meant a lot to me at the time. And, I've learned a lot about myself. I love the build. Like, I love the chip on your shoulder, start from the scratch.
Yeah.
I mean, when I started at Vayner, it was me, AJ Vaynerchuk, and Brian McLaughlin. And we had one player. His name was Jalen Reeves-Maben. And that was some fun times. And so... from there, I was EVP and partner of VaynerSports. I did that for about 3.5 years. But in 2018, I met my current business partner, a guy named Brian Scher.
My brother.
Brian, was a traditional film and TV agent at ICM, Denzel Washington, a lot of really talented actors. I give him credit. He found a lane. He identified signing hip-hop artists and crossing them over into film and TV. And so... he approached me and said, dude, you're a beast on the marketing and endorsement side for athletes, but like, what about hip hop artists? And I was like, I've never really thought about that. But he was working with, Quavo and Yachty and Nicki Minaj and everything.
50, T.I., yeah, he had everybody.
Yeah, and he had put, everything that T.I. had ever been in Family Hustle, put him in American Gangster into Takers, and that led to his career. And so, we actually did an ESPYs event where Gary Vee, T.I., and Beth Moskowitz from Beyond Meat at that time did a panel at Harriet's, shout out to H. Wood. Yeah. We did a panel, and that's where Brian said to me, like, have you ever thought about this? And so fast forward 2020, I decided I wanted to lean a little bit more into the entertainment industry. I decided to leave on amazing terms with AJ and Gary. They were super supportive. At that time, we were focused on more of the marketing and endorsement side. And so I left, started the network advisory, and very blessed. The H Group were one of the partners in the network advisory, John Terzi and Brian Toll, Tony LaPena. They said, look, we like the idea of what you're going to do. We're down to be a partner in it. And so, we initially formed it, myself, Brian, and the H guys, and it's been great ever since. But the idea was to, be kind of the next generation of media and entertainment company. We don't really call ourselves an agency, but, we have kind of 3 core verticals. You have a talent management division, you have a brand and consulting division, and then we have a production company, Network Studios, my partners Manny and Jordan, which kind of the 3 pillars of everything. And the idea is that a couple things. One, talent matters. Every business I've ever been a part of, like, talent these days is used to amplify, used to break through the clutter, break through the noise, all types of talent. And so, we started in 2020, think it's going to be a great time. Well, the pandemic hits. And so we slowly built this thing over time, working with great talent. And then as it kind of pertains. So that's the JG story. I've invested some other different companies. I've invested in Barcode and some other different things, but I love building teams. I love working with talent. I think the days, you see people like Rich Kleiman and you see, partnering with Kevin Durant. I think the days of talent management and people really partnering with their talent and being much more collaborative is like where we want to go.
Yeah.
And I think having those different areas of the company, it's about using those synergies. So if you have talent that wants to do a podcast or is interested in working with a brand, to be able to have those things in-house is really important.
Yeah, I mean, shout out to Brian too. I was just sitting here thinking, like, I met Brian 2018 as well, and that's when I met him, he was getting me hip to. At the time, I was real sports heavy, although a lot of my contacts are in sports and entertainment. But he was telling me our early conversations, like, hey, we could, that crossover world, and
his company was called Crossover Entertainment,
which was ironic, right? Funny story. I remember when I met Brian, I met him at a Power pop-up downtown. Yeah, it was downtown LA. And
I mean, listen, if there's a room and it's like there's one white guy in it, it's probably Brian.
So this is funny.
It's
so
like, dude, who's this older Jewish white guy here?
So
right,
Miles,
shout out, you're not that old, bro.
Yeah, you're not that old. He looks good for his age. You look good, Brian.
Good.
So Brian comes to. So I go to the pop up. I take Miles O'Neal and like the O'Neal family. So I had never even watched the show. They're fans. I go to the pop up. They're like, oh, 50 Cent's gonna come. So I was like, man, it's gonna make me look like the man. So Miles is like, yo, can my mom come? I'm like, well, of course. And so his mother, the great Shawnee O'Neal, she's, big time, Hollywood exec. So I'm like, man, I got to show out. So I go up there early. I like talk to whoever's in charge. I'm like, hey, I need a whole section because I got the O'Neals coming. We got to look good. So this guy, we walk in, he sees Shawnee. He's like, yo, I'll lift the rope. You guys come to VIP early. So I'm like, wow, I'm looking great. So now the VIP starts to fill up. And then this white guy walks in, and it's Brian. So he walks in with Trey Songz and some other people, and he just walks up to me. He's like, hey, man, like, we're hanging out. I'm like, yeah, we're hanging out. And he's like, what do you do? I said, I work with athletes. And so at the time, I was doing a deal for Todd Gurley. And that's my brother. And so he's like, I love Todd. And then I was like, yeah, I'm doing something with him and Melvin Gordon. He's like, I love Melvin. We should put plays together. So we exchanged numbers. And I swear to God, like 6 or 7 days go by, no text, no nothing, no follow-up, right? So I'm at a barbecue with my girlfriend.
Hey, if you ever know Brian Scher, you know that.
Yeah. So I can't make it so. Like 6 days go by, and I'm at a barbecue.
Manny's laughing back here.
Yeah, Manny knows. I mean, like,
don't take it personal, people. He just forgets.
Brian will, his 48 hours is like 98 hours. And so I'm sitting there, and I'm scrolling text, and I'm like, Brian Scher. I was like, wow. So I'm bored at this family barbecue, and I Google him. So when I Google him, I'm like, oh, shit, this guy's a big dog. I kid you not. I swear to God. Right when I'm reading him on Google, I show my girlfriend. I'm like, yo, this dude's done this with Denzel. This guy, Brian, this fucker calls me. Right when I'm showing his, like, Google. So I answer. I'm like, bro, you won't believe this. I was just talking about, Brian. He goes, yeah, sure you were, bro. Yeah, sure you were. So then he says something about Michael Vick, and I go, man, I love Vic. That's like my big bro. He just came to my 30th birthday. He's like, I got Vic his first show. So I was like, wait, you do TV shows? And then he started telling me about the intersection and of what, he was doing. He had just met you. And then I had met you a couple times on the scene when you were doing the Gary Vee stuff, because you guys would always do these parties at whether it's Super Bowl or All-Star, and you would always be like the talent guy. So I would always like have to hit Justin and like get my people in, and you always looked out for me, so we planted the seed.
I'm just always trying to be in the Eddie Murphy business.
Yeah, no, you looked out, but you always planted the seed then. And I just always thought you had this unique vision for that intersection of the sports and entertainment, because rappers talk about it all the time. They want to be the athletes and vice versa. And I think that TNA has actually shown how that works and what that looks like, from what you guys did with Tyreek's show, with everybody at Vocal, things like that. I mean, I guess my question for you is, where was your love for the entertainment side of it? Was it Brian just getting you hip to what he was already doing, or is that something you already kind of had in your back pocket?
Well, I mean, I think, first a couple things. I came from the sports side, and I understood, and I'll say we kind of called it right, that like these guys, the sports business is now become huge, right? These, the talent now have their own production companies, and I knew that that's where things were heading. I think partnering with Brian, who's been through the trenches, man, like if you all don't know the entertainment business, film and TV, it's
a big monster.
It's a behind the scenes. You think you're pitching something, you ain't pitching nothing. Let me tell you, like how shit gets done behind the scenes, you better have shit buttoned up. And I think what Brian did is, unless you have someone who's been through the trenches and sold things and gotten shit over the line, it's really hard to understand that. I think the biggest blessing he gave me is to understand how this entire entertainment world works,
Yeah.
Sports world is different than the entertainment world. I mean, I think I actually like a little of the pageantry that's still is created in the big agency world, right?
Yeah.
Like the idea of like agents have two lists. It's like to call and call back. That's like the to-do list. Like there's nothing. It's like that's
Facts.
it.
Facts.
That's it, And I remember him telling me, I'm like, what's a to call list? He's like, that's it. I just go to work and there's a little list on my desk. It's to call back and call.
That's it.
And that was funny coming from Vayner, right? Vayner was like everything was calendared. We lived by the second. Like Google Meet. It was just funny to like have this archaic to call back assistants calling you. But no, he's given me a lot of good advice. And, look, it's a lot of stuff in my way. I really didn't necessarily felt like I had a lot of mentors who opened doors for me, if that makes sense. My whole way kind of just created my own path. And I felt like Brian exposed me to this other world. And I've always felt like knowledge is everything.
Yes.
Right. And I felt like once I understood it, I could, reverse engineer and put my relationships together,
Right.
So it's been really great. It's been a lot of fun. Yeah, we've watched sports become a huge entertainment property. I mean, look at the streaming rights, look at the leagues that are coming, look at what's going on with women's basketball and women's sports. So, where we want to live is right at that intersection, and we always want to go on what's happening next. NIL has been a big piece of that. It wasn't necessarily when we started the company that's where we were going, but, I've always kind of had this history of just spotting opportunities. I did some stuff in the gaming space in 2020. I
want to jump in on that. So you have a unique ability. You're like the guy, like myself. I always say I'm like the guy that's just always around the football when it's fumbled. I think you do a good job of identifying who's next. We talk about that a lot with Malachi, with Julian. Like, I think you see past just them on the field. We look at what they can be off the field, right? What was it about Tim when you were back in Florida where you were like, this is the guy, and how did you cultivate and maintain that relationship with Tim Tebow?
Well, the interesting thing with Tim is that the maturity for an 18-year-old, right? I just described this environment we're stepping into, national championships, parties. He was just laser focused, on the task, and the task was winning and leading a team, even at like 18. I think it's amazing to have all that that's how you spot the great ones. The ones that have all the fanfare, have all the reason to go off the tracks, but they're just like focused on they feel like they've accomplished nothing.
Nothing, right.
And I mean, we're looking at that Florida Gators documentary. How the fuck did this guy hold it together for them to win 2 national championships? Like, how?
It was a lot going on.
By the way, you heard Cam Newton's interview the other day,
Yeah,
right?
I saw.
He's like, I don't know.
I
don't know how they did it.
He actually he gave Tim a lot of praise too. He was like, that was crazy environment.
I could tell you stories of Tim just literally holding it together, and he did. And because if you really listen to Cam's interview, he basically is saying like, we really had no business with as much shit that was going on. We should have never won any. Like, it's just crazy.
Especially in the SEC, right? I mean, like,
yeah,
the competition level is crazy.
But spotting talent, I mean, it's two things: spotting talent in new opportunities, right? Like, What
does spotting talent look like to you, right? Everybody, especially in LA, everybody out here, the weather's perfect. You can play baseball year round, and sports is great. Everybody's bringing their kids to TNA. They want you to, they think, what I mean? Like, like
Chuck's been pitching me his kid he doesn't even have yet.
I know. I'm like, I need a
dude,
son. Shout out to my daughter Gia, but I was like,
Gia,
my son's coming to TNA. But like, how do you spot that kid and you go, okay, like, yeah, he's a top 50 guy, but what makes him a TNA guy?
We look it through
or girl.
Yeah,
rather.
we look it through a marketing lens. When I constructed the roster, both hip hop talent and now the NIL talent, like, I want to know when we walk in a room with a brand or a company that there's someone defined on like what their demo is, that they're a great fit, and personalities. I think sometimes management companies and agencies go so big, they sign clients, put them on a roster, and they just hope it's gonna fit.
Right.
For us, it's like, if I go into a room with Pepsi, or I go into a room with Manscaped, or I go into a room with Loops Beauty, I know which my clients on the roster make sense. We keep it small and tight. Yeah. We, of course, do some endorsement deals and things with people at times if it makes sense, just bringing them opportunities. But the term like actually managing the client, like, it really is like on an intimate level, if that makes sense. And my thought is like, if you really can sign talent and help them actually build their brand, yeah. And by the way, sometimes they won't work out, but sometimes they will. And if you really, give that attention to detail, as far as spotting talent, it's just watching how certain talent moves, or they have a certain unique selling value from like a marketing standpoint. I think that's it. It's like, do they kind of fit different? When you talk about them to people, does it just resonate a little different?
Yeah, I mean,
and not every talent though is marketable, even if they're a really good athlete. And I think that's something people fall, just because there's lots of athletes I passed on that are just like good athletes, but
but they're not marketable.
They're not a brand. We look at through the lens like, is this person 5 years from now, like, are they Serena Williams? Like, do they have that type of capabilities?
No, I mean that's a great point. I think that's a great segue into the NIL conversation, right? We were talking to one of the producers offline, and he said, well, how do you know what guy and what sport is the best athlete to work with? And I said, well, it's funny. I said, you got the baseball guys who make all the money on their contract, right?
Chuck can't name two of them right now.
Mookie Betts and Ohtani.
Well, that's impressive.
Shout out to the Dodgers. And whoever's on my White Sox. We're just terrible right now. But you got the baseball guy who gets all the money. You've got the basketball guys who get the money and they get the visibility.
Yep.
Then you get the football guy who doesn't have a guaranteed contract. He's making cool money until he, God forbid, tears an ACL, but he also wears a helmet so people don't know who he is, and he doesn't understand why he has to do this marketing thing, right? In the NIL space, everybody thinks they deserve to make money. And the valuations on these players, like you go to on3.com, right? They've got the actual, like, this guy's worth like, $300K, right? Can you break down, how do they come up with that evaluation? And also, where is NIL going in the sense of how they do the pay structure? Because every kid now, I think like the last 5 number 1 picks or something were all transfer quarterbacks, right? So we're dealing with it with Malachi, right? Malachi, 5-star number 1 player.
Yeah.
He transferred, and we know Malachi is going to ball out.
Good. So you don't know if 5 stars, right?
Yeah, and we know Malachi is going to do his thing.
That's actually why he transferred. He knew the only way to be a number 1 pick was to transfer. That's good.
I know. I mean, right? Shout out to, man, I love Malachi. That's my bro, and he's going to do his thing, right? Yeah. But there's probably a brand that might look at that like, oh well, why would I do a deal with the Malachi? Because now he's a transfer. Kind of break down like that process, what that looks like, for a kid in his position.
Well, a couple things. One, the ranking online, you'll have to go deep inside the On3 territory. I think, candidly, they probably launched that product initially just like, dude, we got to stake a claim. I don't know how we're going to figure this out, but we're just going to say this is the ranking.
Right.
You put people on a list, and they automatically love it. And they always want to be number 1, so shout out to them. How do we look about the transfer portal and just all of it? I mean, initially, so let me tell you how I got into the NIL space. I got in because, had the opportunity to do some advising with Bryce Young and Craig Young, got introduced to Malachi and his father in 2021, guys. Like, for all of you that don't know, 2021, wow. The rules changed in NIL July 1st. And I was the crazy person, emailing brands saying, guys, NIL's coming. And they're like, so fuck
you told me 2019 it was coming.
Yeah, they're like, so what? And so 2021 the rules change. I'll never forget where I was. I was in Vegas for a convention, July 21st. I do a Zoom with Malachi and his father, and Malachi's about to commit to Oklahoma. And his father had the wherewithal, Eric Nelson, it's my brother, I'm super proud of him, had the wherewithal to say, like, college NIL exists? Like, what's the deal with high school NIL? And I'm like, great question, Eric Nelson. I don't know, but I'll go find out the answer. So I went with an attorney to the CIF, California High School Federation, and Interscholastic Federation. And I'm thinking they're going to tell me 5 years for high school NIL, 2 years, never come back again. They come back about an hour later, say, we look at the bylaws, and it's legal here in the state of California. We mirror a college. And I call Eric back. I'm like, Eric, here's the deal. You're never going to believe this. It's legal. So I ended up signing Malachi. And he announced for Oklahoma. We didn't actually do an endorsement deal because we were like, okay, and it was almost one of those questions I think Eric was asking for the sake of asking, thinking it was going to be a no. And then when you get the yes, you're like, you ever get that, guys? Like, you get a yes, and you're like, oh, okay, well, I'm not actually prepared to do what I was talking about. So,
like, I was kidding. I was just joking.
Yeah, I was just kidding, guys. Cool. So, Malachi commits, and, I've been on this journey with him and his family ever since. I'll be at Boise this weekend.
Yep.
I mean, Malachi and his dad, I mean, I guess I'm a part of it, but they really paved the way, and I don't think they get enough credit for that. the journey, it's the truth. We've been on an unbelievable up and down journey with this thing, and I wouldn't have it any other way. That's the way we are with our clients, like thick and thin with this thing, especially the NIL space. So Malachi commits to going to Oklahoma. Well, wouldn't you know, in the NIL world, Oklahoma State beats Oklahoma. The next day, Lincoln Riley is now going to USC. So
Wow.
this is 2022. So Malachi is the number one player in the nation. He decommits from Oklahoma, goes to USC. And, you know, been on that journey with him, taking him through that process, being a part of it. And now, you know, for a lot of reasons, he's now at Boise State, spring games this fall. And I think one of those things that kind of plays into it is like, and this is kind of just something for all players, like, as you guys have probably seen, Chuck, like playing time really matters. It's kind of turned into pro football where, you know, playing, they call this, there's this term called go small, play big, where like you go to a smaller school and you get your playing time and then you elevate. You know, it's basically a free agency all the time. I don't know who had the idea to changing the transfer rules the same time NIL was created, but y'all crazy.
It's nuts.
Y'all crazy.
It's nuts.
But, you know, someone once told me, like, where there's chaos, there's opportunity. And I think there's tremendous opportunity in the NIL space for athletes, for players, for brands. I think what's exciting to me and why I spend a lot of my time there is, you know, in the NFL and NBA space, all these brands have done huge endorsement deals with the actual teams and leagues, and they're locked in. You know, Verizon sponsors the NBA. They ain't going anywhere. Yeah. Well, what's cool about the NIL space, and I love so much, is that, you know, doing really creative marketing campaigns gets you noticed. They'll go viral. And for brands, that's a great opportunity because you're catching that virality moment. You know, it's earned media. And so it's been a lot of fun. You know, we put a whole division together. You know, in the beginning, it was just managing talent. And then we realized, like, all these brands want actually strategy of how to enter the NIL space because it's a very nuanced thing. So we have a division that really focuses on that. And then, you know, we're developing multiple show concepts on the NIL space as well. And so people always ask me, like, oh, man, you're the Jerry Maguire of NIL. It's not that we're only focused on NIL. It's just that I recognize right now this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. And
you were at the forefront of the new wave, too.
36 years old. You know, I got introduced to Malachi. I knew from that moment, okay, high school NIL is legal, college NIL is legal. Everything we know now is laid out from that moment. And so, you know, we have aspirations to grow on the other areas. We still work with those entertainers that we talked about, a lot of them, and, you know, the creator space. But to me, you know, I look at these NIL athletes as the opportunity to build their brand, build their platform, catch all these eyeballs, and really build them. It's super exciting and exciting for me because, you know, not all of them will pan out. And the opportunity that maybe we can help some of these guys get a head start when all these eyeballs are on them is compelling. And then last thing, I just love college sports. I've realized this from being in Gainesville this weekend. Like, a lot of the reasons when I was doing pro and, you know, just overseeing the endorsement deals for all the athletes, I love the piece of going to the colleges to recruit. And so now that can actually be my business, it's super exciting.
I mean, no, and you were in Gainesville this past weekend. Your boy DJ Lagway. I mean, we got to shout out to DJ. This kid is, first of all, he's built like an NFL player. He's built like an NFL player right now.
Yes, 6'4", 240.
I mean, he's like Donovan McNabb in an 18-year-old's body right now. Mm-hmm. It's crazy. I mean, just talk about just one being in his shoes. I mean, he's not. What is he? 18.
18.
And they're calling for him to start. We don't know how that'll play out, right? But how do you help him, you know, as his rep in the NIL space, right? How do you help him just maintain, because he's so humble. I know he comes from an incredible family. But,
amazing.
But as a big bro, right? Because and I think that's the thing people should understand about you and what you're doing, right? You're not just, most of these agencies sign these guys, you're just another face on the roster. They don't give a fuck. You know what I mean? But you are a family guy. These people,
You're my family. I have, I mean, you know, people think I'm crazy because I'm on text message chains with the family, the parents, and the kid at all times.
At all times, yeah.
And that's why we don't go sign a million talent, because to us, we're going to sink all our heart, all our energy. I mean, Michaela and everyone, the whole team. We sink all, Johnny Cruz, we sink all our energy, and we're betting with the parents on them, you know, whether we get it right or wrong. Like, we're going to be there at the end. But, you know, DJ, I mean, you bet on kids who have an unbelievable family, personality. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm not saying this is a Florida Gator, but they're lucky to have him. He wants all the smoke, like, prepared to lead us back to victory, wants that on his back, which is insane that he does. Not insane, but, like, he had a lot of other options that I could say would probably be an easier path to winning. He wanted the leadership aspect. He wanted to change the culture. he wanted to bring his guys in, and I think there's something admirable. At times, it gives me I say this all the time, gives me chills because it gives me very Tebow-esque vibes, and I don't want to put that on him, but it's very parallel.
TikTok put it on him already, so you, I mean, like after the spring game, that throw he made was incredible.
Yeah, so it's a blessing though. They have Graham Mertz there. The schedule for Florida is beyond brutal.
It's brutal. It's
they
a brutal
start
schedule.
with Miami and UCF and FSU are away, but it's a great situation. Graham's there. He's a great quarterback. He learns from him.
It's kind of like the Chris Leak and Tebow thing all over again in a way,
very
right?
similar. And in the SEC, you need crew quarterbacks. It's a brutal business, and he is excited to learn from Graham. Of course, we're going to have our moments when he gets out there on the field and he has packages and things, and just excited for him. It was exciting to be in Gainesville this weekend to see the hope that he's kind of giving everyone. So.
No, I mean, shout out to DJ. I mean, the kid's incredible. Definitely a future Heisman winner. We're on Heismans and Grammys. Chuck Walton with Justin Giangrande. Let's break down a high school kid that you do a lot of work with, Julian Lewis, my favorite. Julian's, I've been on him since he was super young, like 10. I think he's incredible, like DJ as well. Talk about how you get a guy like him who, I mean, you got Julian when he was, a freshman in high school?
Well, I met him with his father, TC, who's amazing and does an amazing job of managing him. And I actually saw him, I think he was in 7th grade. He was playing an Atlanta versus California game. And, he was just different. Yeah. Like, people around at the game were like, this kid's just got it. And, his dad's done an amazing job of managing and building his brand. He's the youngest player that was ever on Sports Illustrated's cover. Yeah. As an Allo deal, but kind of the same mentality. I kind of go back to it like Laser. He's got all these other things, but what he cares the most about is like winning. You know what I mean? Like winning, playing football. So I think it's the talent that has both, right? Like they understand and can be a brand, but they also don't lose focus of what it really is. And yeah. I mean, we're talking about these guys, but like I love that the women's side has become big. Obviously, we've seen the basketball, but we signed this woman, Rachel Glenn, national as a freshman high jump champion. Yeah, and
she's phenomenal.
She's a gorgeous girl, got a good social media following. Ended up transferring to Arkansas, and I got to see her last weekend. She's qualified for the Olympics, and that's super exciting. So that's another example. Like she's going to be our own Olympian that's going to take us on that journey. So when we're talking to brands, she's the person that we're pushing to, right? Like I think it's the ability of like having that boutique close-knit relationship where everyone in the company is aligned, like what opportunities make sense for the talent.
I mean, what you're doing is incredible, JG. You're my brother, man. So, I love you. I'm glad I'm a part for the ride and along for the ride, and the future's bright. The future's right now,
I think that's true. The future's right now, man. I mean, out there is someone who's doing something inspirational. And I think, look, we also work with Mike Vick, as you know, and that's been exciting. He's got this big show that's coming out on Amazon in the fall.
Can I just say this? And I love Vic. He's my favorite athlete ever. But I fully believe that Vic is the best talent that we've ever seen in the NFL. I fully believe that.
I mean, look, he definitely changed the game.
Hall of Fame him right now.
Yeah, it's crazy. He's kind of getting his roses now, which is cool. I think this whole generation of quarterbacks and just athletes looked up to him. I think what I'm now realizing, like looking back on a lot of this stuff, is like how much he drove culture too. Like, it's very few athletes that cross over. I mean, name them, guys. I mean, Odell Beckham. Like, there's very few.
We were just talking about.
There's very few that like were fashion icons, cultural icons. And look, he's had his ups and downs, Mike. I think that's my thing is like, if you're going to be in this talent business, that's the one thing is like, you always be prepared. And also just understand there's going to be ups and downs. And are you built for it? Not everyone's built for this type of business. But, I'm super excited about it. You are my brother. Follow Instagram Chuck on Instagram. And, look, all jokes aside, man, I mean, you live at the intersection of this space. Chuck is constantly putting plays together, putting shows together. I think, one thing people love about you is your spirit, bro. People know when you step in a room, you always bring positive energy. You're always bringing people up. And I think that's the kind of people you want to be around, And I think if you continue to kind of be that person for people, that's what people say behind your back. Man, Chuck's a good person, good dude, always like lives up to his word. So, appreciative, excited for You know, volume 2 of
Volume
Heismans.
2, Heismans and Grammys.
I still can't believe Manny gave us this title, but dude,
This is
we're
wild.
just gonna have to roll. By the way, if anyone's won a Heisman or Grammy and would like to be on the next show, you know,
Yeah. And I mean, speaking of Grammys, I mean, before we close, we're gonna close with my bullshit of the week.
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
And because we're gonna.
Yeah, I love this segment. Just
Chuck's bullshit of the week.
Bullshit. What's the bullshit of the week, Chuck?
Leave Drake alone. Leave my dog alone. Shout out to the H-Wood team and all them Delilah Knights and Dennis, the whole OVO family. I'm biased, but leave Drake alone. He's the greatest rapper we've ever seen. There's no debate. Love to Hove and everybody else. Drake is the GOAT. Leave him alone. It's not going to end well for you. Just appreciate the greatness. So please leave Drizzy Drake alone and send that smoke to somebody else. I mean, that's it from Chuck.
It's a wrap.
It's a wrap. Chuck and JG, Heismans and Grammys. Grammys and Heismans. We'll see you episode 2. Shout out to Manny and the team. Michaela, we appreciate you. We'll see you guys next week.